Hey, welcome back to GetSome. Today's episode is with Mike Salem, who's from the platform encryption team, part of the Vault team at ServiceNow. This is a really fun podcast. I hope you guys will really enjoy it. I just need to mention here, we talk about a few things here that are future thoughts and things that might be coming from ServiceNow. So the normal ServiceNow safe harbor warning applies here. Some of the features we'll be talking about might be coming in the future. They're not confirmed, so don't make any purchasing decisions based upon anything we say in this video. Always just make those decisions based upon what is currently released. There will be on the screen somewhere here for you to read a safe harbor notice from ServiceNow. So anyhow, but with that stuff aside, I really hope you enjoy this one. It's a lot of fun. All right. Hey, Mike. Awesome. Thank you for joining me on the show. It's really good to have you here.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
No, not a problem at all. I think encryption in ServiceNow is probably a topic which is growing in popularity with clients, I imagine. From my experience and background in like the last 10 years with ServiceNow, as ServiceNow has become a more entrenched platform within organizations, people are growing more awareness, they're doing more with it. And so I think things like encryption, privacy, and security are things that clients are now looking at investigating. Maybe originally they just used it as an ITSM service desk, but now they're like, hey, we've got a lot of information in here. We really should be locking this down and securing this somehow.
Absolutely.
So I guess first of all, do you want to tell me just a little bit about yourself, how you got into this space and role in ServiceNow, and then we can get into some questions around encryption?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. So my name is Mike Salem. I've been at ServiceNow for just over 3.5 years, I believe. The whole time in a product management role focused on security and privacy and really working with the ServiceNow Vault product, which is a bundle of a few different privacy and security products that we offer for customers. But I've been in the tech industry for a number of years. I actually got started at a different company where I was involved with different security and AI related topics, more on the pre-sales side of things. But I knew that I wanted to focus on security. I knew that I wanted to be in a product management role. And those two things happened to come together at the perfect time with an opening at ServiceNow about 3.5 years ago. And when I saw that opportunity, I came running to it and haven't looked back since.
Yeah, I think it must be a great company to work for. I've never worked for ServiceNow, although having said that, I sort of did indirectly a few years ago, where I was working for a partner and we took over a contract for ServiceNow to provide some remote support and administration services. And in that capacity, I was given a ServiceNow email and I appeared as though I was a ServiceNow employee to these clients. We never deceived them and said that I am, but it looked that way, I guess, to some extent. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was fun. That was actually working with the team that has gone on to become the Impact and Accelerator team.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Yeah, in ServiceNow. Yeah. So. Okay, so encryption, like what is ServiceNow's platform encryption and why is it important to organizations?
Sure. Yeah, no, happy to talk about it. So platform encryption happens to be the thing that I'm focusing on right now currently as a product manager at ServiceNow. And, platform encryption, when you hear that term, it's actually a bundle of two different encryption products. It has what we call cloud encryption and then a different encryption product called column level encryption. And I'll just go over the differences between those two things. So cloud encryption is a capability that we have that provides encryption at rest for all of the customer data within their database that's sitting within our instance. So we do a volume-based encryption so that at the database level, sitting within our data center, we're protecting against things like, physical theft, improper disposal. If a customer is ever worried about a situation in which a hard drive from the data center could, walk itself out of the building in some way, then cloud encryption is what they want to ensure that hard drive, couldn't be accessed in any way and that data couldn't be read in any way, outside of our data center. So that's really I would say the compliance use case. It's probably the most pervasive one that we have for encryption, where customers need to know that the data that they're storing with ServiceNow is encrypted at rest. And kind of full stop there. Column level encryption, on the other hand, is a little bit more targeted, a little bit more specialized. Like it sounds, you're selecting specific columns within your application, both within the app, within the UI, as well as within the database, to be encrypted. So for example, you might select incident.short description or even incident.description. You're isolating the specific columns or fields that you want to make sure that they're encrypted. And so the difference here with cloud encryption is that column level encryption is giving you additional access control points within the cloud, within the instance, to say that, if someone's logged in, whether it's on the customer side or, ServiceNow support, even if we have to log in and provide troubleshooting for a case or something like that. If someone's logged into the instance, if they've not been given explicit access permissions for these encrypted fields, then they won't be able to decrypt that data, regardless of whatever other, ACLs or groups or inheritance models or anything else might have given them. And so this really stands out for customers that have, higher level requirements for security. They want to make sure that they have some sort of, let's call it like role-based access, but specifically for decryption. Maybe only certain people should be allowed to decrypt certain data, and column level encryption is how they can configure that.
So a couple of questions there. So column level would allow you to say, I have a field on the incident table, it's called sensitive data, and only users with, say, the ITIL admin or the admin role would be able to see that field if that field was shown on a form. Is that how it works? It remains encrypted and displayed as an encrypted string unless you have that role? Is that how
That's
that
right.
works?
That's right. Regardless of what, your ACLs or any other kind of permissions would have otherwise given you.
So your ACL might allow someone with ITIL to see the field, but what they will see is an encrypted string because it's not going to be decrypted for them. But if they have the correct role, they can decrypt it and see it.
That's right. Actually, what they would see today is actually a blank value. There's pros and cons for if we would ever want to actually show the encrypted string itself.
Of course, yes.
Right now we show a blank value, but yeah, otherwise that's exactly right.
That's cool. That's a cool level of protection. The other question then was, so I guess you can do both. You can have cloud level encryption on the volume, so everything is protected from a hard drive failing and being sent off and not being disposed of correctly. But then you've got your column level encryption, which is giving you that ability to encrypt data role-based, real time, like while people are using and working and looking at forms.
Exactly right. Yeah, and that's typically what we suggest. Customers do use them both together. We suggest that they're used both together. It's a defense in depth approach, just like you mentioned, where cloud encryption is essentially protecting everything at that lower level. But then for your very sensitive data, where you need those extra in-app permissions, column level encryption is giving you that protection there.
That's a really good data privacy feature.
Definitely.
I guess you hear about it as column encryption, but really, that's a great data privacy feature where I can have information easily available to the people who need to see it. I might even have an HR form, I guess. I've got some information which I really only want HR admins or managers to see, even though I'm already restricting my other ITSM admins from the area. But even within the HR world, I can now say, look, I just want these people to be able to see this stuff. And
that's right.
And no one's going to see it because it's encrypted. Yeah, that's cool.
That's right. And we see our approach to column level encryption with that additional access control point. We see that as a differentiator for how ServiceNow is doing it. When you look across the market and see different implementations of, this somewhat generic term called column level encryption, different vendors, different implementations of this, don't necessarily always have that same level of access control on the columns themselves. For example, if we allowed just an ACL to dictate whether someone can encrypt or decrypt data, that all of a sudden becomes a much wider blast radius for how permissions could get inherited, how things potentially might be misconfigured, just who could potentially access that data. But with our version of it, because it's an isolated and separate access control, it's actually called a module access policy. That becomes your single source of truth for this is the specific list of who can or cannot decrypt data in the app, regardless of what other types of permissions you've set up.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So what impacts then does, sorry, step back. How easy or difficult is it to set up column encryption, for an admin to do? Is it relatively straightforward, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to depend on just the complexity of the implementation that a customer might have in general. How many columns they might want to encrypt, how many different amalgamations of roles and groups, and who should be able to decrypt and encrypt what. At its most basic form, there's essentially 3 key components that customers need to know about if they're going to implement column level encryption. The first thing is called a field encryption module. That module is where the encryption key is configured. What algorithm should we be using? Where is it being stored? How are you configuring it? Those kinds of things. So the field encryption module equates to the encryption key, essentially. The second component is what we call encrypted field configuration. This is where you actually go in and dictate what columns should be encrypted by that key that you just configured. And then the third thing is that module access policy. So once you've decided what fields should be encrypted, the module access policy, or I call it a map for short, MAP, that's where you go in and dictate, okay, now which roles should be able to encrypt or decrypt data. But it can even get more granular than that. You can lock down scripts if you want, so that background scripts or things that are working in the background can't accidentally access sensitive data. You can also lock down system processes. So if you had some sort of scheduled job or nightly job that's maybe doing an export or processing data in some way in the background, you can lock those down from being able to decrypt data if you don't want. So the granularity and the flexibility for how we lock down this data within an instance can be as deep or as light as a customer needs, depending on how they want to configure it.
And so once you've configured it, then just say I've got the incident form, I've configured one field on there to be a sensitive field, which is going to have column level encryption on it, and only admins can see it. Then what impacts does that have upon using that data? Like if I have a flow or something and I want to see that data, do I need to then run my flow as an admin so it can decrypt that field and then use it?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be two primary considerations. As long as the logged in user, the running user that's doing whatever it is that they're doing within the instance, as long as they have the right role that's been granted through one of these module access policies, then they'll be able to work with that data as they need. We can also segment if somebody should only be able to encrypt but not decrypt. Maybe they're just submitting forms but don't need to see the result of them. And then vice versa, we can also set it up so that somebody might be able to decrypt but not encrypt, if they're more on the fulfiller side or something like that. Yeah. So on the foreground, as long as the running user, the logged in user has that correct module access policy, they'll be good to go. The flip side of it is, in the background, if we have things running within a system context, again, there can be scripts that are kind of running in that background mode. There can be, system processes that, might be running as like a system type user. Those things are where customers can either decide to allow those background processes to happen or not. And in the context of a total workflow, if there are background processes that you want to make sure that can work with that encrypted data within the instance, then whatever those are, the scripts, a business rule, a script include, a UI action, whatever those kinds of things are, you could grant those module access policies for them as well. And so it gives you that end-to-end traceability to say, we know exactly how this data is protected, and we know exactly, what or who even, in terms of, or what in terms of the scripts and things like that can access this sensitive data. Now, on the flip side, I'll just quickly say on the flip side, on cloud encryption, there isn't that consideration. Where cloud encryption is concerned, there's essentially no encryption happening in the app at all. It's what we call, transparent to the application, because cloud encryption is only working sort of behind the scenes at the data center level.
Yeah.
So if a customer has cloud encryption and that's it, there's not some of these other aspects that they would need to think about. But they also, have a different level of protection within the instance because of it as well.
And these are both considered encryption at rest techniques.
That's right. Yeah, we would typically say that column level encryption is also providing encryption in use.
Yeah.
Now that term can also be defined in a few different ways, but we'd like to talk about it as encryption in use because we have that access control in the instance that says, as you're using this data, if you don't have the right permissions, you will not be able to decrypt it.
Yeah.
But to your point, yes, they're both, by definition, they're both encryption at rest technologies.
So then what is the ServiceNow, like the encryption architecture like, and what standards and things does ServiceNow follow in the encryption space?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's two main ones that we typically talk about with customers. They're the ones that customers will ask about. You'll see them on our product docs. The first is, secure encryption key storage and the maintenance and things like that. So we follow FIPS 140-2 level 3 validation for our hardware security modules. This essentially means that the place that we store our encryption keys have been validated to that degree, as defined by FIPS, which is, the regulatory body within the US. The second one is NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They have a special publication called 857, where they dictate how keys should be managed, rotation schedules, how you might be able to revoke them, how you can use keys securely within the application. And so the capabilities that we give to customers for how they configure and use these keys also follow that NIST 857 recommendation for key management. So between how we store the keys securely and also how we can give customers the ability to configure and use those keys, both follow, those two different types of processes.
And is that the ServiceNow's key management system or key management framework that we're talking about there?
Yeah, great question. So we do have, a key management system behind the scenes. We would describe it as an HSM or a hardware security backed key management system. That's the overall, hardware and technology that we use to store the keys themselves within our data centers, and we have them geo-replicated so that customers get, in region encryption keys and management based on what data center they're in around the world. But then we also have what we call the key management framework. And the key management framework, that's primarily following that NIST 857 recommendation. And those are the kinds of options that we give customers for how they configure these keys, how they manage them, how they can rotate the keys, revoke the keys, all these kinds of things as following those guidelines.
And so that key rotation, which if I understand it correctly, is you generate a key, you've got a public key available for people to use for decryption or whatever they need to use it for, but you want to, on a periodic basis, change that key. So in case for some reason it's been compromised, it's not out there in the wild being used. So the key management framework will allow you to create a key and then set up a schedule of rotation, and they'll just automatically request a new key and then replace the old one with that. Is that how that works?
That's correct. Yeah, there's a way it works today. There's some ideas that we would like to explore in the future. And, we're open to any customers that might want to reach out and kind of help us flesh these ideas out. But the way it works today is customers have an option between a ServiceNow generated encryption key or a customer supplied key that they generate somewhere else and they send to us. And so now on the ServiceNow generated side, it's as easy as clicking a button. We use our HSMs, our HSM backed key management system, to generate an encryption key on behalf of the customer. It's being used within the instance, and then they can either click another button to manually rotate that key if they want, or they can set up schedules and reminders to have those keys rotate on a periodic basis, whether it's 6 months or a year or something like that. On the customer supplied key side, if they want to send a key to us, they can still do similar things, but whenever they want to rotate it, they would just need to make sure to send the new one that they want to rotate to for that.
Right. So with that key, when you're doing key rotation, if this makes no sense, because encryption isn't my field of expertise.
No worries at all.
But so an example I've got my ServiceNow environment, and I've got a third party that wants to access ServiceNow via an API, REST API or something, and I want to secure that. So they've been given my public key. If I then rotate that key, do I need to notify them that it's changed, or is that some sort of an automated process of updating? Like when their application hits ServiceNow, to ServiceNow say, hey, that key you're using is old, here's a new public key, now use that one. It just does an automatic rollover?
It depends again on which encryption product is in use. If it's only cloud encryption, and we use that term that the encryption is transparent to the application, then there's no need for any of those integrations, to have any awareness that any encryption is even happening. Because as far as the application is concerned, as far as the integrations are concerned, that data is being transmitted back and forth, unencrypted.
Yeah.
On the cloud encryption side, the encryption really is only on the hard drives themselves, kind of behind the scenes in the data center. Where column level encryption is concerned, because that is, encrypting and decrypting data at the application level itself, then if you have integrations, and let's just use like a service account, for example, if you had a service account that's being used as the user that's interacting with, a third-party system in ServiceNow,
yeah,
you would really just need to make sure that that service account, or whatever that integration user is, has the correct module access policy to be able to transmit that data back and forth if it needs to those third-party systems. And that's pretty typically, if we see that a customer is experiencing some sort of issue with application level encryption and integrations, that's typically what the root cause is that service account or whatever it is doesn't have the right, map or module access policy.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So if we're doing this column level encryption, does it impact search functionality and things like that? Because people are looking at fields since they can't see that information.
It can. That's something that we're actively exploring on, what we can do more there, but it can. So some search capability is available today with column level encryption, but the root cause of this is really just, in many ways, the state of the art of how ciphertext, that encrypted data can be processed in general. So what is possible today is if you have data that's column level encrypted, you can do an exact keyword search. So like if, let's say, incident.short description, if that short description field had Mike Salem in there, just Mike Salem, and someone searched for those two words, Mike Salem, it's an exact match, then my encrypted data, for the person that has the right map permissions, my encrypted data would be viewable to them in that search result. But if it's not an exact keyword search, let's say you have a journal field, and that journal field has a whole paragraph, and Mike Salem is one of the two words within that paragraph, that's what starts to get impacted. And those are the kinds of things that we're hoping to maybe, enhance in some way in the future. And really what's going on behind the scenes is, we have the ciphertext stored in our database. And based on the encryption key, we know what Mike Salem would turn into in ciphertext. There's some additional configurations around deterministic and non-deterministic and how that affects what ciphertext is produced. But if we can essentially match up the search term and how that's converted with what we have in the database, we can return what's in there.
So it's an exact match, like you say, it's an exact term. You can effectively encrypt that term and then look at the encrypted string and do an exact match against the encrypted string in that field and go, oh, that's obviously the same thing because we've encrypted them with the same key. Right.
That's right. If a customer has what we call equality preserving turned on, equality preserving, synonymous with deterministic in this case, that's where we can do those exact matches.
Yeah. Okay.
There are some ideas maybe down the road, I'm not sure when or if, for how we might be able to do those non-exact matches. But again, it's we're at the point of pushing the boundaries of even academia today for how you can process encrypted data.
I guess that's a lot of processing load if effectively you've got to go and hit that journal field, decrypt the whole journal field, then search in it for a string, then encrypt it again or dump it out of memory or whatever. It's going to slow things down.
You're exactly right. And those are the kind of things where if we were to do something like that, we would just want to make sure that the decryption is still within some sort of, trusted execution environment, or somewhere it's not accidentally, exposing data that's decrypted with that we shouldn't be in some way, just because we're in the pursuit of enhancing search like that.
So this makes me think then of like another topic now, and there were Twitter X posts yesterday about this from Microsoft with their quantum computer that's coming out. I mean, that might be a scenario for quantum computing where you could say, well, we can do this now because we can effectively structure a little quantum computer in our data center to create the function that would give us this exact string match within this field, and the wave function collapses, and you're like, yeah, it's in that. We found it. It's in this record.
So potentially,
yeah. But then you've got the problem of, well, maybe everything can get decrypted by this now. So is this something that you guys are thinking about, or is a concern in this space?
It is, yeah. And I want to give you just kind of some insight into what we're thinking about, but I also just want to clarify again, on the cloud encryption side, search is not impacted. Because again, as far as the app is concerned, there's no encryption happening. It's only on the the column level where we have to make some of those trade-offs. But yeah, for quantum, I mean, we do have customers asking about it. Absolutely. They'll ask, what are our plans for quantum safe computing? How are we thinking about post quantum cryptography and the hypothetical, but in the maybe somewhat near term realistic types of attacks and threats that could be going on. And so we like to break it down into, two different buckets, asymmetric cryptography and symmetric cryptography. And while, on paper, both of those would, in theory, be susceptible to, a quantum computing attack of some kind, what we see, in academia and in industry right now is that the asymmetric side of cryptography is the one that's more near-term susceptible to those kinds of attacks. Not so much on the symmetric side.
I would have thought the asymmetric would be the tougher one because you've got a private key here and a public key here, whereas symmetric, you're both sharing the same key. So
that's right. Yeah, but it's reversed. And so on the asymmetric side, typically what we see a lot with the asymmetric cryptography, at least for the products that I'm talking about, have to do with secure key exchange. If we're wanting to, again, if a customer is wanting to upload a key to us, they would typically, download our public key first, encrypt their key with it, send it to us, and then to your point, we would use our private key to decrypt the key that they sent, and then we would be able to use it as we need. So on the asymmetric side, there's two angles to it. On the pure asymmetric algorithms themselves, we have our own cryptography vendors that are supplying the kinds of algorithms that we use. And, we're working with them. We're waiting on those post-quantum approved asymmetric algorithms to be released. And as soon as they are, we'll start to work to incorporate them into those places where we use asymmetric cryptography today. But even within those, for those examples of secure key exchange that I was talking about, we are looking at some ways to use symmetric cryptography where possible, even for those key exchange type scenarios. So, let's say that we needed a customer to encrypt or wrap a key that, we would send to them first, and then they would encrypt it, outside of the instance and kind of send it back to us. There's some thinking and some potential ideas around, could we encrypt the key that we send to them with a symmetric key encryption key first, so that if the asymmetric exchange was ever, in theory, pierced via a quantum computer, there would still be a symmetric wrapping around it that would be much less susceptible to that in our lifetime, really.
Yeah.
So we are thinking about it. There's a little bit of what can we be doing now, prioritizing symmetric encryption wherever possible, both in key exchange scenarios as well as, long-term storage, which is the more usual case for symmetric encryption. But on those asymmetric algorithms themselves, we really are, we're waiting on the the post-quantum approved asymmetric algorithms to be released, and then we'll incorporate them as soon as we can.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it's interesting to know that there is even post-quantum algorithms being developed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They're coming.
Well, I suppose they have to. If there is a possibility that everything we encrypt on the internet is at risk at some stage in the future, yeah.
Of course.
So then, what about AI in your space at ServiceNow with encryption and security? Are you guys looking at how you can use AI, or is it not something that's really applicable to the field?
Yeah, I mentioned that I'm on a product team for overall what we call ServiceNow Vault, and Vault has 5 different products. The platform encryption product that I focus on is one of those 5, and so for Vault as a whole, yeah, we're exploring AI in many different places for anomaly detection, for finding sensitive data within an instance, and then specifically for use cases around encryption. For the encryption side, some of the things that we're looking for, again, are on the anomaly detection side. Let's say you're doing in-app encryption through column level encryption, and maybe there's a certain role or a certain integration or something that has never decrypted data before, and all of a sudden now it is. So being able to find that anomalous behavior and being able to flag it for customer admins and things, and to say, hey, this is something that's happening, it's never happened before, could be potentially sensitive, what do you want to do about it? So really kind of the anomalies of what's happening with encryption and decryption.
So less of the AI in the operation of the encryption, but more around the management and governance of encryption. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there are some of the the forefront of it too, the configuration of it. Some of the things that we're looking at just kind of within the Gen AI realm as a whole is concepts of text to configuration. So if you needed to say, at the beginning I described those 3 components: the modules for the keys, the field you want to encrypt, and the module access policies or the maps for who should have access. If you just had some sort of agent where you could say, in common language, I want to encrypt these fields, create a key, and give these roles access, and the agent could then just take care of it all for you behind the scenes. Yeah, we're looking at how to simplify knowing the back end of how to configure it, and just kind of needing to know the process of what you need to be working, and let the agent take care of it after that.
Yeah, that's a really good use case. I just think that would make this area of ServiceNow so much easier to be able to just say that. Can you encrypt that field on the incident table and just let security admins see it? Okay, done.
Exactly. Yeah. So not something we have today. I know that the whole company really is looking at how we can apply AI in different ways. But those are the 2 ways, just right off the top of my head, that I know that we're exploring internally for encryption.
So, are there lots of clients who are using the encryption technologies? Are there lots of clients that you think should be and they're not using it yet? I mean, are there hurdles to using it, or even like in terms of pricing? Is the platform encryption something which is available to all ServiceNow clients, or do you need to purchase it as an additional SKU? Or?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would say that we can tackle the what's included and what's an add-on first. With column level encryption, there is an included out-of-the-box version of it. Customers can get a limited amount of usage to kind of test and try out and see if it works for them. And then if they get to a threshold of usage, then they would need to be in that add-on mode. So as of the Yokohama release, which is coming out shortly, the included version, which we're actually relaunching as a product called Field Encryption, the included version would have up to 5 encrypted columns for free, or included rather, but no ability to encrypt attachments and no ability to do any like bring your own key kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So if you had more than 5 columns you want to encrypt, or if you want to encrypt attachments, or if you want to do some more advanced key management, bringing your own key and rotating keys and things like that, that would put you in the add-on tier that you would need to go for the premium version of it. On the cloud encryption side, there's not an included version of cloud encryption. So any customer that would want to ensure that all their data is encrypted at rest, that would also be a candidate for that add-on version as well, which is called platform encryption.
Okay. Just on like bring your own key. Why would a client want to bring their own key and not just have ServiceNow generate the keys for them and manage that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it can be a pretty hot debate in terms of, compliance and, is there a requirement that a customer has to adhere to versus, the security story of it. And, is it in some way more secure or better to use a bring your own key versus a ServiceNow generated key? And there's a third option that we are exploring. It's not possible today, but again, we're actively soliciting customer feedback for it. And so I'll just touch on, let's touch on bring your own key first. We have quite a lot of customers who need to control how the keys are generated. And, they may have a trusted vendor or a trusted hardware security module or a trusted, team or some place where they say, this is the one part of our organization that generates encryption keys. And so we know what algorithms being used. We know, the bit size that's in place. We know exactly how this key is being created. And so with those types of customers, sometimes they need to rely on that. And they'll say to us, they'll say, well, if ServiceNow is generating the key, even though, we trust you, it's not coming from this trusted place that we know of that it needs to be from within our organization. And so for customers that have those kinds of requirements, the ability for them to generate the key satisfies, that type of compliance requirement that they have, and then they can still upload it to us.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reality is when they upload it to us, it essentially is the same thing as if we created it ourselves. But the difference is the origin of that key and the control of that key in terms of, how customers can create it on their own versus, trusting us to create it for them.
But you do, I imagine, have plenty of clients who use the ServiceNow keys, and
absolutely, yeah,
they're as safe as someone generating their own keys, if not safer.
Right.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, using those, what I mentioned earlier, the FIPS 140-2 level 3 hardware security modules, that is as safe, if not safer, than different ways that customers might generate those keys on their own. And so we definitely have more customers relying on the ServiceNow generated key, but we offer that bring your own key for those more specific customers that have to control the origin of where the key comes from.
So what are some other, if we haven't already sort of covered them, what are some other misconceptions, or like what advice would you give to clients if they're looking at adopting either of the platform encryptions?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would say that it's more pervasive for customers to come to us and say that, they just want to encrypt all data at rest. They're in a specific part of the world, or they're in a specific industry, or they have a specific, internal security or IT policy that just says all data stored with a cloud vendor of some kind has to be encrypted at rest. And, they're looking for the least effort and the highest, compliance resolution. And so for those types of customers, which are by far the greatest number that I work with, cloud encryption would be the right thing for them. They can ask us to turn cloud encryption on for their instance. We go through a process behind the scenes to ensure that the hardware that's being used for those instances is cloud encrypted. And then there's really nothing else a customer has to do. If they would like to rotate keys, or if they would like to bring their own key, they can. But they can also just, leave the default settings essentially that we have in place and just kind of continue on with whatever workflows that they need with ServiceNow.
Is there a transition? Like if I'm operating on ServiceNow today and I don't have cloud encryption, and I say, hey, I want to do that now to meet some compliance, and I come to you or come to my account manager and say, I want to turn this on. Well, they say, okay, you need to get the add-on and pay for that. That's fine. But then in terms of operationally, like, is there any downtime, or it happens seamlessly, or?
Yeah, there would be a window that we would alert customers to. They can schedule it as they want, so they can tell us when the window should be. but it's a 15-minute downtime. And what we tell customers is that 15-minute downtime can occur within an hour window.
Yeah.
So we would tell customers, this is your hour window, or they can schedule that hour window with us. And then within that hour window, there would be a 15-minute downtime somewhere within there. And that's our process behind the scenes of actually switching out the infrastructure that those instances are running on to be cloud encrypted infrastructure, in our data center.
Yeah. And that's much like a platform upgrade. You've got that probably about 15 minutes where it might be offline during an hour-long period. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, really not a whole lot for them to do other than approve that window, and then we take care of the rest.
And that's it. And what sort of misconceptions are there out there in the industry or amongst clients about encryption that you come across?
Yeah, I would say the biggest one that I hear is that just the language that I hear is that encryption breaks things, and that can happen depending on what encryption technology is being used, how it's been configured, those kinds of things. But again, when we're talking about cloud encryption, and which is ServiceNow's version of that volume level encryption for all the data at rest, there's really nothing for the application to be aware of. So there's nothing that the encryption would be breaking, quote unquote, breaking in that way. So it's seamless. It's easy to be working, and there's not a customer concern there. On the other hand, when I see customers using what we call a proxy-based solution, where we have, let's say that there's an encryption key that's hosted somewhere else on another server, and a customer routes their traffic through that other server before it gets to the instance, and so that data is encrypted somewhere else before it gets to us. And we have no access to the key. We have no ability to process that ciphertext. We can't work with the data at all because they're encrypting it, elsewhere before it even gets to us. Those are the types of situations in which I see, encryption obstructing things, because workflows, behind the scenes processes, all kinds of things, the only thing that is exposed to them is ciphertext, so they can't essentially make sense of what's going on.
And so this would be edge encryption as opposed to platform encryption.
That's right.
Where that sort of problem can happen, because as we were sort of mentioning before, you within your own environment, when you're sending data to ServiceNow, you route it through a proxy. You then effectively get any sensitive information tokenized. You send a token to ServiceNow. ServiceNow stores a token and says, well, you've given me a token. I can't tell what this actually says.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so if there's back-end processes on the instance side that aren't able to go through that proxy, they have no ability otherwise to work with that ciphertext. And that's actually where column level encryption is also a differentiator, because since column level encryption is still providing encryption in the application, just like Edge was, but column level encryption has that module access policy capability. We can then give those background processes access to data as they need it, or customers could choose not to. And so it's a middle ground there to be able to turn on or off, how the instance should be able to work with that encrypted data.
So column level encryption then would be, or could be, a replacement for edge encryption in terms of operation on the ServiceNow, but column level encryption wouldn't be a replacement for edge encryption in terms of the transit part from the client's environment to ServiceNow. Would that be correct in saying that?
That's right. We've had customers, equate edge encryption to what we would call encryption in transit, and in their view, they were wanting Edge to fulfill that encryption in transit capability. But in reality, whenever a customer is connecting to an instance, and using us over the internet, they are getting encryption in transit just through TLS 1.2.
Yeah.
And so from that perspective, it is fulfilling that, that transit capability. But then, yeah, to your point, column level encryption is actually the forward path for customers that were on Edge. We're in a process right now of end of lifing Edge encryption, and column level encryption is the suggested replacement for it.
given that it replaces it on the instance, and you've already got TLS operating across the internet anyhow, so you're already getting that encryption in transit capability.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay. So that's interesting. So the edge encryption will be deprecated.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, it'll be a long process. We have customers that are, we have a few customers still. It's not a very widely used or adopted product by any means, but we have a few customers that are still on it. And so, for those select customers, we'll support it until they move off of it, which could be, a year, 2 years, things like that. But for any new customers, Edge is already considered, end of sale. So it's not available to be used for new customers anymore. It's only at that sunset stage of supporting customers as they move off it that are currently using it today.
So earlier on, you spoke about ServiceNow Vault. So is that the product suite, which it's got 5 components?
Sure.
Can you tell me a little bit about Vault?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. So I mentioned that platform encryption is a bundle of 2 products, cloud encryption and column level encryption, soon to be called field encryption. And Vault is a bundle of 5 products. So platform encryption is one of those overall products within Vault. So the additional ones that Vault has are what we call data privacy. That gives customers the ability to classify data in certain ways if they have different, internal data classification levels that they need to assign to different types of data. Within data privacy, they could discover where sensitive data is. If they have, let's say, an accidental, social security number or tax ID or something that wound its way into a journal field, you could use the discovery feature of data privacy to go and find that information and decide what you want to do with it. And then there's also an anonymization feature. So if customers need to comply with, like a right to be forgotten request from GDPR, or if they want to clone down from production into non-production, but they don't want to expose, sensitive production level data into those non-prods, that anonymization feature could be used for those types of use cases. But that's just one. So data privacy. We also have what we call zero trust access, and that allows you to assign policies for what permissions somebody should have when they log in based on the device they logged in from, the part of the world they logged in from, the network that they're on, all kinds of other things, so that maybe organizations want to give the ability for their employees to log in from home, but if you're going to log in from home, you can't access the CMDB table or something like that.
Yeah.
Or if they log in, maybe they should be read-only.
Or if it's still see your reports or something, but you can't see more sensitive information.
Exactly. And in
zero trust, was that called? What was that called?
It's called zero trust access.
Zero trust access.
Yeah, and I'll just say in Yokohama for zero trust access, we're actually rolling out a continuous authentication feature. So for people that are already logged in, if they're going to view, maybe some sort of sensitive data, or if they're going to do some sort of sensitive operation, we can actually then re-ask the customer to authenticate, force another MFA check or something again, just to make sure that this really is who this person says they are, and that they've given, the identity verification again before they do this sensitive action.
I haven't walked away from my computer in the office and someone else has said, "Oh, I know he's got admin access. I'll go and check out someone's profile." Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So then the other person would get the MFA notification and not approve it. Yeah.
So that's a continuous access under the zero trust access.
That's right.
So there was data encryption, so platform encryption, data privacy, the zero trust access.
Yeah, and then we have 2 more. Yeah. So within Vault, the last 2 are what we call the log export service. And so this plugs into our Kafka infrastructure behind the scenes. And if customers are using, an enterprise-wide SIM, like let's just say if they're using Splunk or something like that, and they collect all the logs from all of their cloud providers in one centralized place, they don't want to have to log into each individual application and, view the logs and download them and, transfer them and do things like that. The log export service allows us to just pipe those logs out through Kafka as soon as they're generated within ServiceNow, so that customers can then manage them and view them and analyze them within that common SIM. Like a common example is Splunk, and so they can use this for performance, troubleshooting and testing if they want. If something's taken a long time to load or not working exactly how they thought, they could view those logs from within, like a Splunk, or even security type incidents. If there's an incident that they need to investigate, they could ingest those logs in that centralized place, piping them out from ServiceNow, and then correlate them with other things. If they have stuff in Amazon or Azure, they can start to correlate, a common place for logs that might be happening across their organization as a whole. Yeah. And then the last one that's included is called code signing. And code signing, we want to grow it in a lot of different ways. We think it has a lot of potential. Right now, it's pretty specifically tailored for the mid server, and the whole concept is, the mid server is very powerful, and plenty, if not all, ServiceNow customers use it pretty heavily because it allows them to discover IP addresses, manage IT assets, monitor and schedule patch schedules and things like that. But some customers can be concerned. They can say, well, if ServiceNow can be used to send scripts and other types of code that execute beyond or behind our firewall, we're concerned that maybe something could be accidental or malicious that would come from ServiceNow that would negatively affect something behind our firewall. And so what code signing does is we set up what we call a circle of trust. There's a way that you can certify admins or instances, an entire SDLC process to be trusted for how scripts get onto the mid server and what they're doing. And so if a script has ever been seen to maybe be changed or has evidence of being tampered with, or is maybe coming from a non-trusted location or a person, then the mid server will just block it and won't allow it to execute. And so that's what gives those customers the assurance that if there's something accidental, changed accidentally, or maybe it was malicious, like a drop table command or something like that, and we can tell, then it will not execute. And that's essentially protecting customers who are concerned about those types of possibilities. That's code signing, the fifth product.
And so that code signing, that's is that where customers have a concern that what is already coming from ServiceNow could be in some way dangerous to them, or is it more that it's about other sources pushing information to a mid server and trying to get the mid server to run that code?
It would be the first one. It would be again, whether it's an accident or let's say, hypothetically some credentials were phished and someone is in an instance, but maybe shouldn't be, still having protections in place, regardless of if the user or the script, on the surface looks authorized otherwise.
Yeah. Okay, so that's Vault.
Yeah.
And so have we covered off, or are you allowed to talk about with Yokohama coming out? Is there any sort of new things that we haven't talked about already that you would want to discuss coming out in the space?
So I mentioned we are planning for relaunching, column level encryption, a new but similar product called field encryption. I mentioned the continuous authentication coming for zero trust access. But yeah, we have a very exciting roadmap for Yokohama, for Z, for when the alphabet turns back around and we get to
Australia. I learned
exactly,
the other day.
That's right. Yeah. But yeah, keep an eye on the product docs and our release announcement and all those kinds of things, because we'd love for everyone listening to check it out.
So is there, look, if you want to send it to me, I'll afterwards I can put it at the bottom of the video in the description, but do you have any particular resource sites that if people want to go and find out about what's coming in Vault or in the platform security, if you want to send them through, I'll just drop them in the description so people can have a look if they've watched the video. That'd be useful too, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll send them to you. You can include them in the video. We have our product docs. We have a community forum that I and the other product managers, we monitor, and we can interact with people that ask questions. But yeah, I can send all that to you. Absolutely.
Yeah, because I think if I can get those direct links, that will help people, because there's no shortage of information about ServiceNow out there, but sometimes it's actually tough to track down what's specific to, or what, what really relate to what you're looking for. I find it often I'll be 2 weeks into researching a topic, and then I go, oh, I've never seen this site before. I didn't know the guys were doing these videos. So,
absolutely, yeah. I will definitely send you that information. We'd love for anyone watching or listening to check it out and follow up with us.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, Mike. This has been really good fun.
Good. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Super interesting.